Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Magi Show. This is one I've been looking forward to doing for a long time. It took me forever to get the show notes ready, but I'm going to give it a try tonight and see how it goes. So tonight's show is about the occult diet. It's the oldest battle of vegans versus carnies. And what did they think about what was the superior diet? And are human origins tied to what we eat? And is the origins of language tied to diet as well? And what do you think is the future of the carnivore diet? Is there a dark side? Alright, so I guess I'll jump right into the slides. I don't think I have any other things to mention first. Alright, the first slide I prepared is probably two guys you might be familiar with if you've been following the carnivore versus vegan diet already. There's two popular YouTubers that I watch a lot because I'm a fan of actually both diets. So there's the guy here on the left, I believe his name is Sverige, and he does a channel talking to ex-vegans about a lot of the problems that they had when they went to become vegan long term. So I guess, yeah, a lot of people have probably heard a lot of the upsides of veganism, but if you haven't heard the bad sides or the downsides, you probably want to check out Sverige's channel. It is a little bit graphic in nature at some points, him eating raw meat and drinking blood and stuff, but it's definitely something that, I don't know, I found very entertaining. Okay, and then the next guy on the right is a guy that lives actually close to me, Vegan Gains. I believe his channel is, I didn't really start watching his channel from the beginning, but I think he was a weightlifter who turned vegan. And he talks about it more as not being a diet, but as like a philosophical approach to living, like not wanting to harm animals as much as possible. And I think that's a great idea. It's like, I actually grew up, my grandpa was into factory farming. And we had a chicken farm, so I got to see like firsthand a lot of the brutality that goes on to the animals, and it's definitely not nice to say the least, but I'm totally not against factory farming just because of the alternative is like millions of people dying from starvation, right? So there's definitely hit and misses when it comes to that as well. But I thought I should do a show because it's like, how many times do we hear that this vegan situation's like a new phenomenon and carnivores arguing with vegans is considered to be somewhat of like a new thing? But I guess it's really only new on YouTube, right? So yeah, that's a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be covering on the show today. Yeah, I guess Sverige kind of has a... Oh, there's just a message from me in the chat and I spelt it wrong. Sorry about that, folks. But anyways, yeah, if anyone's watching the show live and they want to jump in with questions, I'm going to try to get a lot of slides covered today, so I might not have a lot of time for questions. Won't be checking the ones on Facebook Live, but if you're on YouTube, and heck, even if you want to come in as a Skype caller, that'd be cool. Got that all set up to go. Right, and I guess, yeah, I'll jump right into the next slide. Oh yeah, here I was just going to mention that when these guys do their videos, I think in most cases, they're doing it like in the purpose of like trying to determine what is best for your human health. Like, is meat eating better or is plant eating better? And yeah, they're both like determining the ethics of it. I guess Sverige isn't really into animal cruelty laws at all too much. I'm not sure about his stance on that, but I know that, what is it, Vegan Gains, he's like totally against animal cruelty. And then, what is it? Yeah, and I'm assuming both of them do their channels for the most part for YouTube views. I know Sverige has said that he doesn't monetize his channel because YouTube won't allow him to. I'm not sure if that's really the case. Seems a little weird, but I guess I'll take his word for it on that. And yeah, and I guess they're always debating too, like, what is the superior diet? So that's some of the things I'm going to try to cover on this episode today. Alright, the next slide that I got here, I guess I wanted to talk about Freemasonry a little bit. I know, like I mentioned there was a really popular YouTuber, what's her name, Kasumi Chris, who does videos about veganism, and or I guess she used to be vegan and now she went carnivore for a while. I'm Not sure exactly what her diet is now. She switched to the balanced diet. But yeah, she mentioned some stuff about, I think I was watching one of her videos about diet and veganism. And I think it was carnivorism that came up, and I was like, hey, that there's a whole occult side to this argument, that like they're really into the vegan versus carnivore philosophies. And a few people commented that, hey, Freemasons got nothing to do with that kind of stuff, and what the heck are you talking about? And I just wanted to clarify, like, Freemasonry is much in the same way as the Catholic Church, how they all have like different types of branches. Or I guess like Christianity has different branches. There's like Protestants and Anglicans and Roman Catholics and Orthodox, like a million different branches for all these different types of churches. But Freemasonry has the same type of system set up where there's different branches of Freemasonry. You could go into one lodge and what they tell you is going to be completely different from what another lodge tells you. So when someone says they're a Freemason and it has nothing to do with it, it's like, well, they could be telling the truth that their lodge doesn't have anything to do with it. But in today's episode, I'm going to cover some lodges that do cover it, and I've got a little bit of evidence to show, and there's quite a bit of dark sides to it, so I don't know if anyone's like eating dinner, they probably don't want to watch this show, or at least wait till after, because man, you might hurl. So, I guess, yeah, let's see if I had anything else. So, yeah, in Freemasonry, when they talk about this diet stuff, it also holds the key to immortality and how to access the seventh heaven. And that's something that a lot of Freemasons like to keep on the down low, the hush-hush. So, yeah, you might be interested in hearing about that. Yeah, and then we have the Freemasons. I guess they're going to be talking about the origins of species, origins of languages, and how this all possibly connects to the Anunnaki. I don't know if most people have probably heard about the Anunnaki as being those ancient aliens that you see on TV, and I don't know, personally I think they're more like spiritual entities that live like in internal dimensions rather than in outer space, but I guess everyone's got their own opinion on that, and no one knows for sure, that's for sure. Okay, so I guess I'll jump right into the next slide. Yeah, here we have the depiction of how the oldest battle on record of Freemasons, or not Freemasons, vegans versus carnivores worked out. And it's from the Bible, and I'm not going to make this show too preachy because I'm not really big into the Hebrew interpretations of the Bible anyways. I'm more into the pagan side of it, so I'll try not to get too preachy in this whole thing. But if you're wanting to hear about Freemasons, their whole books are based on the Bible, so you're kind of going to have to cover some biblical terminology if you're going to talk Freemasonry. Because Freemasonry is like really big into Cain. And the whole reason they're into Cain, I believe, is because of his ability to build with stone. And that his ability to build like huge buildings out of stone and cities happened to come from this battle between vegans and carnivores. So I'll explain a little bit how the story went. It's like I don't have a Bible in front of me, so I'm just going by memory. If anyone wants to correct me in the chat for stuff I screw up on, please go right ahead, and maybe I'll try to update it. But yeah, so what happened was there's these two guys, Cain and Abel, they're brothers, and they're having this battle between which is the best food, which is plants or meat. And the reason they battle about it isn't for YouTube views or to determine the best health, but the reason they want to is because they're using it as sacrificial offerings to summon gods or demons. So I was like, wow, that's kind of messed up, right? Like, we always hear that the carnivore diet and the vegan diet has all this stuff behind it, but I never really put it together that it's like, man, this is really old argument, and it's got some really messed up like reasons for why they were arguing about this. So anyways, how it went down is they were testing to see, like, proving which diet is correct. I think, what is it, Spherge and Vegan Gains, I don't know if they've ever challenged each other to a UFC style fight or boxing match to try to prove it, but what Cain and Abel did is they set up two different offering tables, and one of them put plants out on it, and then the other one put out meat, and then they were testing to see which the gods favored more. Did they want to eat meat, or did they want to eat plants, right? So they set up their sacrifices, and lo and behold, I guess, what was it, Cain had his set up with plants, and he wasn't having the greatest luck. But Abel set his up with meat, and he got like summoned God like right away, and he was like, all right, I won the challenge, right? The carnivore wins. So then I guess Cain and Abel, after this challenge was completed, they decided to go for a walk. Cain didn't tell his brother why they were going out for a walk, but I guess he was really pissed about losing the argument. So he ended up killing his brother. And it was like, I think the Bible states that it was the first murder in history. Well, according to their history. But anyway, so part of this curse, when God found out that, or the Creator found out that he killed his brother, he's like, hey man, it's like, you're not going to be able to grow food anymore. The curse is every time they put seeds in the ground to grow plants, he's going to be fucked because they'll never sprout. So I guess the Creator also banished him to a really far away place called Nod. And academics for, I guess, 1,000 years have been trying to figure out where Nod is, but no one's really been able to place it. Well, and the other part of his curse was the Creator felt bad because he was giving him all these curses, but he's still like one of the only people around at that time, and he wanted him to survive. So he gave him one advantage, and that was the ability to be able to build stone cities. And then I guess the reason for that is that he wanted people to bring food to Cain. So even though he was, I guess he was a vegan, but he couldn't grow food, so he was going to start having all these cities and people are going to bring plants to him. Maybe meat too at this point, because I'm thinking after he lost that challenge, he's probably thinking, hey man, maybe there's something to this whole meat thing after all, right? So anyway, so I guess I won't stick too long on this. What I wanted to get into next is how I started to get involved in this whole like vegan versus carny debate, or why I started researching it and watching all these channels. Yeah, my background's kind of messed up. It's like my grandma was from Eastern Europe, and she was like a dream psychic, and she got sentenced to death for it even, but she managed to escape from Europe and then come to Canada. My grandpa, this is my grandpa, my grandma, and me in the picture. I guess people always assume they can recognize me, but I look different with hair, I think, right? So anyways, yeah, my grandma managed to make it to Canada, and I didn't really get to talk to her too much because I wasn't able to speak Ukrainian, and I think her English was a little bit less. Same with my grandpa's. So, and she also didn't live very long. I don't know if it's connected to the whole dream thing, but I'm pretty sure it might have been. And anyways, she had a bad condition. She died really young. So, yeah, I guess I won't get into too much more about that. Let's see. Yeah, so basically after my grandma died, I ended up having this really strange paranormal occurrence where these really messed up light beings, well, I call the Amesha Spenta now, but these guys gave me a coin, and the coin just so happened to be tied into this whole vegan carnivore debate. It has this symbol on the right here, which is here it is. Yeah, we got a symbol on the right here, which is the Mexico coat of arms. And the Mexico coat of arms, when I did more research into it, I found out the bottom here of it is a sacrificial offering table, and then there's a cactus sprouting out of it for the sacred tree, and then there's a bird at the top with descending serpents. And I really didn't know much about like the whole history of this Aztec coin when I got it, because I was only about 11 years old or 10, somewhere around there. And back then we didn't have the internet, and looking stuff up in libraries wasn't really the easiest. So for like decades I had no idea what this coin was, but eventually I found out what it was, the whole sacrifice thing. So I'll just check, make sure. Yeah, so after I got this coin, I did research for years and years and years trying to figure out what it was. And then it was about the year 2012. I was watching a TV show called, America on Earth with Scott Walter. And he did some information about how Phoenicians might have been coming to America a really long time ago. And he presented a bunch of evidence. I encourage everyone to check out his show. So when I was watching that evidence, I'm like, man, if these Phoenicians came all the way to America, I should go and check up north, because a lot of people are checking down south for clues, but up north in Canada, there's tons of remote area that no one's checking out really that much, and hardly doing TV shows or anything about it. So I kind of had a hunch that there was going to be something up north. And what I ended up doing was going to the Raw Museum. Yeah, and then at the Raw Museum, it's like this big museum that we have in Toronto. And I found, what was it, a Sumerian tablet. There was like a Mesopotamian exhibit going. And it had the winged disc symbol at the top. And I was like, hey, I've seen that winged disc symbol before in different Sumerian and Mesopotamian stuff. So I started to wonder, I was like, hey, does the Sumerians and these Phoenicians have something in common if they're both using the same symbology for God or for the creator? So I guess I'll get on to the next slide. Oh yeah, and then what happened was I sort of hit a brick wall, or a dead end. Couldn't figure out where to take my research, like where to look exactly up north for this the clues that I'm looking for to solve the coin. So I decided to turn to my dreams. And my dreams, like my grandma's, often gave me information about what I should be doing. And they showed me a river that I should go visit up north, and a bunch of other stuff. And then I ended up buying the property next to the river, searched around it, found some really wild stuff like UFO tales and Bigfoot stuff, and it's a really fucked up area. But I couldn't find anything like an offering table. So I continued to look around, and it was about a 30-minute drive from the dream that I had about the river that I found this giant holy mountain. It was with Google Earth that I helped track it down too. So I'm like, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to climb to the top of this holy mountain and see if I can find any information about how to solve this coin that has to do with like this debate of vegan and meat eating and a whole bunch of other stuff. So yeah, this is a picture here of what the holy mountain looks like. And I think it was holy to the Ojibwe people. I'm pretty sure there was wars going on over the mountain, like two different groups of First Nations tribes fighting for control of it. Because one of the old legends talks about tribes that got trapped on the top during fights. So, yeah, let's see. Yeah, I'll show them the next slide. Yeah, this is what my camp looked like when I managed to climb to the top of the mountain. And when I was up there, it was pretty secluded. Like, I don't recommend going to this place. It's actually like a really awful place to go to 99% of the year. Most times it's either so cold and snowing that you're never going to make it there without freezing your butt off, or buried in snow. You can't even get through the roads. There's only a couple of roads in that area, so when one gets shut down, the whole city's cut off from civilization. So you're definitely not going to want to travel there in the winter. And if you try going in the summer, it's a fucking nightmare for bugs. Like, you think the Amazon jungle and shit has a lot of bugs? Try going up north in Canada. It's like, it's so bad when you're driving, like, just down the road. You have to use your windshield wipers when it's not raining. And guess why? Because you fucking smash through so many bugs that your windshield is just covered in bug carcasses. So it's like you won't find too many vegans, I guess, that live up north, because you can't even travel in a car without killing thousands of insects for every mile. Yeah, and how I managed to avert it is, like, the first trip I went up, I got eaten alive, started feeling really sick, and had to go back early. But then the next trip I managed to go, and these are like 14-hour bus trips to get there, and cost a lot of money. It's like my family was going to the Caribbean, and they're like, hey, do you want to use your money and come to the Caribbean? It's like, no, I'm going to go fucking explore up in hell. But anyway, so yeah, the bugs and everything are fucking shit up there. But if you wear a bug suit, like a sort of like a bee suit, if you get one of those, it's somewhat tolerable. Although I brought friends with the bug suits and said, hey guys, you want to try wearing these? And they fucking went crazy too. They were saying that just because the bugs aren't biting you, the constant sound of like thousands of mosquitoes buzzing around your head, all trying to bite through the mask, it starts to drive you nuts after a while. And it's like you can't even take the mask up like for a minute to breathe, or not to breathe, to drink or eat. As soon as you do, the bugs will start going in your fucking suit. But yeah, so just to end, it's dangerous to climb up there. I found out that someone just died climbing up this year in July. Yeah, sorry to hear about that. And my condolences go out to the family. It was just a teenager that died too. Fucking tragic. But yeah, so it's definitely a dangerous trip. I don't recommend it, but if you did happen to do it, it's fucking amazing. Like, I don't know, there's a couple weeks in the year you can make it there where it's just like around frost time. So it's not winter yet, but it's still cold enough to kill the bugs. And then you'll get a little chance that it's not hell on earth. And there's also the oldest Stonehenge in the world. It's just down the street from this place. It's like actually in this picture, it's over around there is where the Stonehenge is. Quite a bit more over to the right, but you can almost see it. So yeah, this holy mountain is pretty wild. And when I was camping up there the first few times, I didn't know much about it at all. But then I started to research some of the history. Let's see. Yeah, one thing that's really unique about this area is it just so happens to be the second best gold mine in the entire world. And I was kind of surprised by that because I had always heard that Africa has really amazing gold, or I guess, what is it, Fire Creek in the United States. I believe that's what, California or something. So yeah, I'd heard they'd had really gold, but I never knew that Canada was that high up. And then when I was thinking about the whole Nod legend, how Cain was banished somewhere, it's like the Anunnaki usually banish people for gold mining purposes. So if he was to be banished somewhere really far away and it had the best gold, this would actually be the location of Nod as far as all the information I can find. And just to give you an idea of how much gold is here, this is to scale of the CN Tower and how big the fucking gold is under the ground. And it goes for miles. And I actually do some work on ley lines if people want to check out my other videos. There's the ley line that connects this Draco Stonehenge to the Holy Mountain with all the gold under it. It continues around the entire globe. And it just so happens to go through that place in California, the ones in Africa. I'm sure a lot of mining companies already know about it because they've put like gold mines for, I think what they say, 20 miles down this same road. And I think a lot of people around the world don't know about it because like Freemasons are heavily involved in this town up north. They put up a bunch of lodges and they got statues and monuments that they've put up in places. So that could be one reason, like they want to keep the gold on the down low. But yeah, and so after I spent all that time camping up there, I searched the entire top of the mountain. And I went up there in, 2013, the first spring after they had a major fire. So the fire burnt the entire top of the mountain, and I was able to find the offering table. And I was like, that was pretty messed up because I was thinking I got to try to go to this holy mountain and find an offering table. And then when I found one, I was like, holy fuck, this is really strange. Like, maybe there's no history of sacrifice and this really isn't an offering table. But in the meantime, I tried using it. Like, I knew that there was stories from the Magi, and the Magi are basically the priest of the ancient Anunnaki religion. Yeah, Freemasons are really into the Magi stuff, but I guess maybe not all Freemasons, depending which lodge you go to. So anyway, so I tried using this ancient universal internet that the Magi used to gaze stars and get information. And I was going off what I had heard from Robert Bauval. He had that theory that Orion was connected to the layout of the pyramids. So I was thinking, hey, I should try stargazing Orion's belt in this offering table and see if I'm able to get any of the information the Magi did. It's a pretty ambitious plan, but it was wild to say the least. Like, I didn't get the greatest connection to this universal internet, but when I was stargazing, it was fucking unreal. Like, they had I forget what meteor shower it is, like one of the popular ones in August or something. And it was unreal because like I lived in the city my whole life, like 30 years I guess at that point. I guess I would have been older. But anyway, so I lived in the city and I've never seen like real stars. Like sure, in the city you can see the Big Dipper, the moon, and that's about it, right? But once you go up north and you start seeing the stars, it is like in a completely different sky. There was so many stars, I couldn't even find the Big Dipper. I was like, holy shit, there's like billions of stars that I can see. And the Milky Way. Like people have seen the Milky Way in pictures before, but when you see it for the first time in crystal clear clarity, I was like floored. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, man, seeing the Milky Way is better than anything I've ever seen on TV. It's incredible. And then I had this meteor shower going. So I'm sitting there trying to stargaze, and all I see above me is like a little bit of reflections of stars, but I can't see Orion. And all when I look up, I just see constant spray of meteors. It's like, I know when you're in the city and you see a meteor, you're like, whoa, a shooting star, whoa, a shooting star. Like maybe every half hour or something, if you spend the whole night looking. But up there during the meteor shower, it was like a meteor, I think 3 or 4 were going simultaneously at all times. And it was like hundreds of them. Meteors, meteors, meteors. I was like, what the fuck? It's like I never knew this was even possible. So despite not really having the greatest luck connecting to the universal internet, it was unreal, that trip. But I should get back into like the whole carnivore and sacrifices and plant stuff. Oh boy, this is where it gets a little bit disgusting, so you could tell I'm getting a little nervous to even talk about it, but alright, so yeah, I guess I'll bring it up. Alright, so we'll get into the history of the mountain. When I got back into the town, I started to research it. I think maybe it was after I did a podcast and someone told me that there was an Ojibwe history. You can check my archive if you want to see that one. And he was telling me about how there was history of sacrifice on the mountain, that I wasn't way off on that prediction. And then when I got home and looked it up, yeah, that's what I found out. Let's see. It says here that long before the European adventurers arrived, in 1686, there was a legend that the mountain was used as a place of sacrifice by the inhabitants of the area. The ancestors of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, and I don't know how to say Atikamekwa. Sorry for butchering that. But yeah, so I don't know if the Ojibwe and the Anishinaabe were the ones that were fighting over the mountain, or they're the same tribes or peoples. Maybe if any First Nations people are watching, if they could post in the comments. I know First Nations history is like really tough to talk about. Like even when you watch videos online, people that are First Nations will share some of their history, and they'll get a lot of comments in the section saying, hey, you're not supposed to share our history with the outsiders and stuff. From what I gather, like in the old days, or even today, they didn't have like a lot of money type transactions, but they often used knowledge as exchange for currency. So if you wanted to pay someone for some goods, you would tell them something like, oh, there's a really good hunting spot over here, or you tell them the history of your people or something, and that's how the exchanges would go. So I guess it's part of their culture to not really be giving all the stuff away for free. But I've talked to a bunch of other First Nations people, and they're like, hey, like, sure, there's people that are like that, but there's also ones that don't care about trying to keep everything a secret, and they're okay with talking about it and sharing it with outsiders. So I guess you can never really please everyone. So I guess I'll say thanks for sharing what history they have so far. Yeah, and then the really freaky part, I didn't even know, like here I am camping on this mountain alone, and I had some fucked up shit happen, and it almost freaked me out, and I was getting like really bad vibes, like something horrible had been happening on this mountain, like sacrifice type stuff. And then when I got back and I read this story, it was in July of 1995, the body of a man was found on top of this holy mountain without a head or both hands, and a right foot were missing. We'll get more into the right foot part, or I guess it'd be left. So, yeah, close to him, they found a shotgun and no cartridge. And the clothings were city clothing. Were city clothes and not men's clothes. Well, that's pretty fucked up. I don't know if that's just something in the French translation. Sorry, this is from a French website translated into English, so some of it might be a little bit off. There was absolutely no identification on the body, and no one had been reported missing. So solving the case was like next to impossible. And they were still asking the question if this was a case of murder or suicide. The body was found by 3 young people who were delineating lots for the government. I don't know what that means. If anyone wants to post in the comments. It's a rifle and bullet, alcohol, and a newspaper dated July 5th. We're some 30 feet from the corpse, and he's wearing a gray city coat. So yeah, I guess back in those days, like farmers and up north people would be wearing the old lumberjack plaid clothes, and if you were wearing a city type clothes, you stood out pretty bad. Well, then here's just some information about the fire. Yeah, the fire happened just before I watched that show, or yeah, that American on Earth show aired in December 21st of 2012. So the fire happened a bit before that, but then I came the spring thereafter, so the spring of 2013. So that's why I was able to explore the top of the mountain, luckily, and have most of it burnt away so I could see what it was. Because if you go up there now, it's almost impossible to walk around the top. All the trails grew back in with trees, and it's a real shame because they had this wicked trail going around the edge that you could see all this cool stuff, and now it's like you're just trekking through a freaking jungle to get through it. But alright, so I guess I'll get on to the next slide. I don't really want to talk about that murder and stuff. It's fucking horrifying, but yeah, I really didn't think I was going to be getting into all that stuff because I always heard that sacrifices weren't necessary anymore. Like, that's some of the stuff you hear in the Bible. So I was assuming that I'd be able to do all this without needing to do any animal sacrifices. And then I looked up how animal sacrifices work when I got back. And I found out that basically what it was is that this ancient internet or universal akashic records that the Magi were stargazing came with like a fail-safe firewall to block people out that weren't worthy of using it. And I guess it worked for a long time where people couldn't figure it out, so they couldn't get to the seventh heaven, and the immortals had the seventh heaven all to themselves. But I guess humanity figured out a way, is that this fail-safe work that only someone who is completely free of sin or pure of heart, or however you want to talk about it, was able to access it. So anyone who had sinned couldn't. And you know, people, like, we fuck up almost every day, or at least once a day. So, yeah, no one was worthy. And then the way they found out around it is you could pay a penance in exchange for your sins. And that penance just so happened to be sacrificing an animal. And I guess that's because the gods were into eating meat. So they wanted to smell burning flesh of animals. They liked meat better than plants. That whole Cain and Abel thing. So yeah, that's what I found out when I was looking at this Orion thing. I started looking it up on star maps to figure out if I could get more information about how this stargazing stuff worked. And it just so has it, when you look up in the sky next to Orion, there's Taurus. And that's basically a giant, like a animal with horns. And some people debate what he is. I think, what is it, a ram or an elk or an ox? There's a bunch of different translations. And basically what I believe is that the sacrifice ritual worked with any horned beast. So that's why in ancient times you see tons of motives of horned beasts being killed. That's because they were doing this ritual. Yeah, it's really weird too. When I was up on the Holy Mountain, actually I'm not sure if it was the last time I was there or maybe the second last. Yeah, I think it was the last time. Yeah, my uncle was in really rough shape, like in and out of the hospital for his heart. So I went up there to pray to see if I could get a miracle. And after I was finished praying, I sort of gave up and I was climbing back down the mountain. And that whole day was a nightmare. I managed to walk for 30 kilometers to get there. Ran out of food for the day, so I was basically water fasting and walking for 30 kilometers, then climbing a mountain. So by the time I was done all this praying, I was like completely and emotionally exhausted, and I started to climb down the mountain. And just as I was doing that, my camera died, like the last battery, and I was like, ah shit, there goes my last battery. Isn't that always the time when something happens? And then just as I finished saying that, something happened. It was like this weird rabbit came around the corner when I was climbing down the mountain. And it may not sound strange to see a rabbit, but when you're up north like that, I've been there for like multiple trips year after year, and you hardly ever see any wildlife. I don't know if it's because the hunters killed everything or the bears killed everything or Like, I know there's moose, and I know there's bears, and I know there's lynx, but you rarely see them. It's like, I think I've only seen a bear up there 2 or 3 times. And every time I don't want to see them. But anyway, so yeah, this rabbit was like freaking me out because I'm like, holy fuck, how did this rabbit get all the way to the top of the mountain? And it was really weird about him is he didn't look like a normal rabbit. Like, you know when you see your traditional Easter bunny that has like this normal look to it? And there's also hares and rabbits, like different species of rabbits. Well, this one looked more like a hare because it had like way longer hair. And it had like a, you know, those Asian Kung Fu master mustaches. It had one of those. I was like, holy shit, I've never seen a rabbit like this before. Why is it coming so close to me? And the fucking rabbit walked like right next to me along the trail like I wasn't even there. It was like I was invisible to the rabbit. And I was like, that is the most weird hare or rabbit encounter I've ever had. And then I noticed it on the stargazing pattern that they also have the hair underneath the Orion's belt. So after that, I was like, holy shit. But yeah, and I think First Nations people have this tradition about the hare or the sacred rabbit being connected to the creator. So yeah, if any First Nations people want to share more of their history about that, that'd be sick. Yeah, so this whole Orion's Belt guy, I started to realize that there's cultures all over the world that have been getting into this vegan carnivore debate and doing these sacrifices. Because you see this Orion's Belt symbology all over the place. It's like in England, it's in Egypt, it was in Mesopotamia. And yeah, they even had the offering tables beneath. So yeah, I guess I'm just going to check my notes to make sure I didn't want to do anything else. Oh yeah, and the other thing I was going to talk about too, when I mentioned in the beginning of the show about how language also connects to this vegan carnivore debate. And it just so has it that some of the earliest cave art in the world happens to show this Orion stance. And that was from Bulgaria there. And then I noticed, yeah, the Incas were doing it, the Ojibwe had it, the Zoroastrians, Mesopotamians. And then who is it? Kirill was mentioning his research on the cave up in Bulgaria, and he was connecting this symbol to different letters. I think he had it connecting to a different one, but I ended up connecting it to the letter A. And then I was like, wow, that's pretty wild that that's the symbol for the letter A, is like this old sacrifice ritual about killing animals. And I was like, geez, that's kind of gross. And it just so happens, like, you know, the old saying alpha to omega? Well, alpha was the A, and A was like the beginning sort of thing. So I was like, what does A in the beginning have to do with this symbol? And then I was like, oh yeah, this is the symbol for God. So I started looking at the different symbols of like how this turns into this one. And this is another, I think, what one is this? This is the Akkadian, I believe, version for the God symbol. And they also put God and self. So they're almost implying that God is within, sort of thing, or the creator. And then the Phoenicians had a pretty wild version of it, with the winged disc above them, and sitting on a chair. And then it was wild too that the Phoenicians' letter for A was just like a sideways A. I was like, isn't that neat? Kind of looks like a bird's beak. Then you happen to go over to the Egyptian version for this Orion stance, and he's got his knee bent, just like that star constellation. And they used the symbol hawk instead of the Alf, or the A. I was like, isn't it neat how the Phoenicians' A and the hawk's beak are almost the same? So it's like, that's where you can see how language was evolving, right? So if you keep tracing this letter A down, it goes into Slavic languages, then the English alphabet. I guess it was, what, through the Latin or whatever it is. Yeah, and then the Ojibwe version. I was surprised how similar the Ojibwe version is. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not, well, yes. I read a little bit saying that the Ojibwes didn't have written languages, but then I also read some that they did. So I'm not really too sure if anyone wants to post if the Ojibwe did have a letter A, or maybe they weren't writing at that time. I don't know. Oh yeah, and here I'll get into the explanation about it. So A, or the letter A, the alpha, or the alf. The alf is was an animal. I think the alf was another horned beast, so similar to an ox or a sheep, or not a sheep, a ram, something like that. And it shows here, yeah, the Phoenicians and how they had that symbol. Yeah, I guess the Egyptian hieroglyph depicting an ox head. Well, that's strange, because I looked up the Phoenician glyph for it and it was the beak. So maybe they had more than one. Yeah, it's weird too, they're always debating, or I guess they don't really debate it officially, but which culture is older, the Phoenicians or the Egyptians? I kind of wonder if they existed at the same time. Because I know a lot of people will say, oh, the Phoenicians aren't that old, but their shit is almost identical culture-wise to the Canaanites. And the Canaanites are just as old as the Egyptians, so it's a little bit weird. Oh yeah, here's another one. There's a couple of YouTubers that always talk about, like on the carnivore side of things, if the carnivore diet is superior because ancient cave people were killing animals and drawing it on the wall, saying that, hey, our brains are evolving because we're hunting animals and we're starting to eat meat. I was thinking, yeah, that's kind of a neat theory, but it doesn't really quite add up to me, because it's like, lots of other animals are eating meat and their brains aren't growing, so like what the fuck's with that, right? It's not really adding up. But I was like, hey, wait a minute, it's like, what happens if this cave art wasn't really just showing hunting animals, but it was specifically showing hunting these horned animals, like the elf or the ram, the thing needed for sacrifice? And lo and behold, when I was typing on Google today, I found the CBC story was posting this image. They're like, oh, this is the earliest cave art they can find, and it happens to show hunting, and it happens to show a horned beast. So I'm like, oh, maybe this really is that connection of alpha to omega, that the beginning of people was when we first started sacrificing and doing this ritual. That's what changed us into more modern humans. Oh yeah, and another weird thing too, I was looking at, like, we seen that Orion guy, and I noticed that his symbology is like every culture around the world, like even in India, the First Nations and Aztecs, you name it, they've got it. But it was weird that the Vedic or the Hindu, I'm not sure which, it's he has 4 arms. I was like, what's the deal with the multi-arm thing? And then lo and behold, this one here, it's one of the First Nations ones, and this one was just released recently in a museum in Ottawa, where the First Nations people started to share their history for the first time. So we're getting their star maps and stuff, and holy shit, their star maps are way more advanced. It's kind of ironic, because I guess, well, it's awful that the Europeans are making fun of them, saying that they were less civilized. Meanwhile, you look at their star charts, and they were way more advanced than the Europeans, but... But anyways, the First Nations guys drew a circle around them. I was like, hey, that circle reminds me of the winged disc. Right? But that still didn't answer the multiple arm thing. So I started digging a little bit deeper into the First Nations side of it. And then they showed that this winged disc guy would spin. So I was like, oh, if he's spinning, that would make it seem like multiple arms, right? So I was like, that's why the Vedic and Hindu ones were depicting him with 4 arms. And then I tried looking up the reason for this whole spinning thing. And it says, like, when you look up at stars, some that are going, what is it, rising directly east to the right, blah, 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 they'll just do that pattern. Stars that rise in the southeast do a different pattern. But then when you got constellations that are closer to the north, like Orion, I guess is, then they start doing a spinning motion counterclockwise because of the way the planet turns and orbits and all that shit. If someone knows more about that scientific shit, they can post it in the chat. It's not really my specialty. So I was like, okay, now I've got some ideas. I know that the winged disc isn't really an alien UFO or anything anymore. It's not the symbol for Planet X, but it's the symbol for Orion and how the Orion's belt guy spins. I think that's why the Egyptians put the hawk symbol for the letter A. It's because they wanted a bird to show it. And I guess technically they could have also used the bull, because the bull, yeah, here, it's right here. Yeah, so this would have also been their letter A, I guess. But yeah, showing that it was part of the ritual. Oh, and then this is King Tut's chair, and he was sitting on it shows him sitting on a chair, and the glyph for this chair happens to be the glyph for gold. And I was thinking more like alchemical gold. Like, if anyone doesn't know, alchemists are like really into gold transformation, but a lot of people think they're trying to do it for monetary purposes, but for most cases, I believe what they're trying to do is change the human body into the ultimate form, and like the light beings. So that's really what I believe the symbol for gold was showing, was this transformation. Yeah, and then just it'll show here that like Orion's got his knee bent, and the Egyptians put King Tut's knee bent to show it was the same one. They included the horned beast as the symbol to show that it was part of the sacrifice needed for the ritual. And isn't it weird too when you think about it, that this ritual gives you the instructions on how to do the ritual in the stars? Like, it's almost that theory where people talk about as above, so below sort of thing. It's pretty wild. Oh yeah, and then this one, I was at the Raw Museum again in Toronto, and they've got exhibits for every different culture, so I was checking out the Asian ones to see what they had. And they had the same symbology with the bent knee, standing on top of the horned beast for the sacrifice. And then they got the bird at the top, the winged disc. And even in India, this is one, I believe it's, I forget the name of the story, but it's this big story in Hindu mythology about how this guy had to do a sacrifice and stuff, and it's a pretty wild cartoon I've seen on YouTube. If anyone wants to see that cartoon, like the meaning behind this whole thing, just give me a shout in the chat and to remind me to post the link to it. I'll forget everything. Alright, what else did I want to cover on this one? Oh yeah, and this King Tut chair is also the mirror image of Lord Pakal's tomb. I know a lot of people talk about with the ancient alien theory. It's funny, if you lay them next to each other, the symbols on both are near the same. Oh yeah, that's what I was getting at. So King Pakal's tomb had this, King Tut's tomb, and then these Japanese ones or Asian ones of some type. It was also for tombs. So I started to gather that like this whole thing was about the immortality ritual, because they're placing it on tombs. And when people died, they always wanted to become immortal in the afterlife. Oh yeah, and then I found out too, I was thinking, basically when I had my encounter with the light beings, I guess I should switch scenes here. Yeah, it was pretty messed up, because they showed me what it looked like for where they came from, like the place where the light beings live. I think some people call it the seventh heaven or the place of the immortals. And it was fucking packed. Like, you want to talk about the streets in India or Mumbai being packed? It's like you go to the place where the immortals live, it's like fucking shoulder to shoulder immortals everywhere. So I'm pretty sure like they ran into a space issue, where that's why they didn't want everyone coming in to become immortal and being like in the seventh heaven. And there's lots of different legends around the world that talk about this too. They're like, hey, the immortals don't want to share heaven with humanity. They don't like us going there. That's why they want to keep this ritual secret. So I think when you look into different cultures that have rules about not killing the horned beasts, like cows or bulls and stuff, that's one of the reasons why, is they didn't want all those people to figure this out. And then Spherge was even talking about on some of his videos, so they're like, they don't want people drinking blood because of what they can learn about what it does. So I guess I'll try not to get too graphic, but get into a little bit more about that. Okay, so where was I? Oh yeah, the offering table that I was researching up north just so happened to have one that matches in Bulgaria. And I was like, man, that's kind of fucked up, right? Like, Bulgaria and Canada are really far away, I didn't assume that the Phoenicians would be traveling from place to place. You can see like they even put the roads in the same general places. The cities ended up being in the same places. It even faces the same direction for sunrise and sunsets. The roads are even going east-west in the same directions. It's like if you came from Bulgaria and you got to Canada, it would be like a second home. And it just so happens when, Adam and Eve got banished from the garden, one of the most likely spots they got banished to was up north, and up north of the Holy Land is Bulgaria. So I think Adam and Eve, when they were there, this is probably the location that Cain and Abel had that big feud. And then when Cain was banished, he got banished to a place that looked identical, but in Canada. It's a fucking far out theory, but I haven't really seen too many better ones yet, so I figured I'd share it. Yeah, so here's a map just showing like the area, what I was researching up north. It's up here is where that holy mountain is. And I realized after checking maps that it connects to the Ottawa River. And the Ottawa River is a shipping route that takes you to the St. Lawrence. And then from the St. Lawrence, you can go right to the ocean. And there also happened to be a place called Magog where they were loading and unloading the gold shipments, like from, I guess, way up north in Canada where Cain was mining, and he was shipping it all the way back to the Holy Land. But I don't think Cain was actually doing that. I think that was like a little bit later in the bloodline, because Cain would have been in rough shape, right? Like, he got banished there, he's living in this fucking hellhole, and eventually he had to migrate down north to get away from the winter, because the winter up north in Canada, I'm assuming you know, it fucking sucks. Get winter 8 months a year, you're not growing too much food, even if you could grow food. So anyways, yeah, so Cain wandered all the way down south. He got to a place in, today's Mexico City, built a giant city, people started bringing him food, and he named it Enoch after his son. And today the city's still called Tenochtitlan, that's buried underneath Mexico. And the name Tenochtitlan is so old, no one knows who named it that. So I thought that was kind of neat. He still got the city that fucking Cain built, and it's still named the same thing. Excuse me. Sorry, I just find that a little hilarious. So anyways, I'll get into more about the whole fucking the vegan carny debate with Magog. This Magog history with the Cain and with the vegans and the meat eaters is where we start to get into the dark side of where the carnivore diet is going. I noticed when I watch Spherege's video, he always does that. Like at the end or some point in the show, he's like, hey guys, what do you think the future of veganism is? And I got all these different answers, and I'm like, well, fuck, man, why don't you ever ask what the future of carnivorism is? And maybe he knows there's like a really dark side to carnivorism that's connected to this Magog place. So I guess I'll get more into that. Don't even want to talk about it, it's so nasty. Jeez. Alright, hopefully laughing will help me get through it. Usually I use laughing as a defense mechanism for stress, and it works pretty good most times. Alright, so this Magog place, I guess we'll skip ahead. Oh yeah, if people wanted to see that whole thing I was talking about Bulgaria, where they ship the gold to, there's where Bulgaria is there. I know like a lot of people aren't familiar with European history, like fuck, my ancestors are from there 3 generations ago, and I don't fucking know anything about Europe, really. In my school, all they taught us was First Nations history. And I find it ironic, they're always saying, hey, we need to teach more of that. It's like, more? That's all you taught. I guess they taught like the treaty parts of it, to like, oh, we did treaties with these tribes, and we did treaties with that tribe, and so I guess they don't get into the good shit about the First Nations history. They just go on about all the fucking bullshit treaties and stuff. Alright, so yeah, I guess finish that. Yeah, I've got a podcast guest, Curtis, who was on. He's actually from Magog, and he was all into the researching it. So I think he was sharing this picture. If you want to go to this Magog place and you take it on the highway, it's exit 33. And for people that are familiar with Freemasonry, the 33 degrees and all that, 33rd degree Freemason, it's a pretty popular term, so I thought that was kind of neat. Yeah, and then on the top of the mountain that they have in there in Magog is where the original stone owl is. You may have heard of the stone owl at Bohemian Grove before. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's like a Freemason type lodge or a country club somewhere in California. Yeah, and then they have this fake owl that's made out of rock or plaster to look like rock, and it's based on this one. So this one in Magog is where all the master Freemasons meet. It's the largest lodge in the world, or outdoor lodge in the world. And they call it the Golden Rule Lodge, which I thought was kind of funny because that's where they, in the ancient times, were loading up all the gold for the shipments. Yeah, and if anyone's been to this Golden Rule Lodge on the top of Magog and they want to post in the chat, I'd love to hear some more about it. Alright, so I guess I skipped a little too far ahead. This place in Magog, like, it's weird that it's called Magog because Magog is the grandson of Noah. That's his name. So it's like this place was named after Noah's grandson. That's fucked up in America, right? But then it turns out that the First Nations have a Magog word too, and theirs meant a very large expanse of water. So I was like, oh, Noah's grandson, very large expanse of water. It's like these seem to have some sort of connection. And then the whole language thing too. It's like if you look into the old languages from Mesopotamia, like Old Persian and stuff, it's the same language as a lot of the First Nation words. Like they have the same word for spirit. What is it, Manitou? So I was like, what the fuck, right? It's like, how come a lot of academics aren't telling people that the ancient Mesopotamian language and the First Nations ones are almost the same? It's like, that's kind of fucked, no? We're trying to say that they didn't have contact. Well, what the hell? Alright, well, I won't get too much into the conspiratorial stuff. I just want to clarify this is not a conspiracy channel. It's very highly against the YouTube rules. So anyways, we'll get more into the future dark side of cannibalism, or I guess carnivore. I just gave it away. It turns out that in parts of America, they have legends. I guess the Seetika, where was the tribe that was telling legends about these people they encountered. And they said that they had problems with red-haired giants, and that they were cannibals. And that the reason they were doing this cannibalism stuff is it was extending their lifespans. It was like the future of carnivore. It's like eventually you eat regular species like animals and stuff, but these giants figured out that if you ate human brains, like baby brains, it was loaded with stem cells and it was keeping them alive for thousands of years. So the First Nations people weren't really cool with that. They're like, hey, you fucking giants stealing our babies and eating their brains. So they trapped them all in a cave and burnt them alive. And it's like, it sounds like an awful thing to do to someone, but man, if they just ate your baby's brains, I'm pretty sure I'd be burning them alive too. Oh, that's a horrible thing to laugh at. Sorry. Oh, shit. Okay. So, yeah, that's the weird fucked up part. Well, I guess I won't get too much into that yet. And then in Europe, there was also the stories of the Magog people, and they were said to be humans that were doing cannibalism. And they were depicted on medieval cosmological maps. So they even knew, like, in ancient Europe, this whole Magog thing connecting to the cannibals was bad, and it had to do with the rituals and the stars and stuff. And then the Bible talks a little bit about them too. It says that the Canaanites, the Amorites, basically those, the people that, what's that guy's name? David and Goliath. So Goliath, the giant, his people were these people, the Amorites. And they were the red-haired sons of Noah. And I didn't know that. It's like, they don't really tell you, like, in church and stuff, like the whole story about the Bible. They don't tell you the pagan parts of it. So I guess I'll just fill you guys in if you haven't heard it before. Like, you know how well, you might not know, there's more than one book in the Bible. There's the original Old Testament, and then there's the New Testament. People call it the two different chapters because it's basically two different people. It's like the Hebrews weren't the same people as the original Old Testament. They came later. And who the original Old Testament people were, I guess it's not even that. So the Old Testament is split up into two books too. There's before the flood and after the flood. So after the flood is when you had Noah and his descendants, and then eventually came the Hebrews. But before the flood, there was an entire like giant race of people that were redheads, and that's who the original Bible began with. And their ancestors ended up getting into wars with the new tribes, the Hebrews. The Hebrews killed them all and took the religion and usurped it as their own. And then that's how we got the next testaments, which is the irony, because Jesus and the other New Testament, the same thing sort of happened again, where Europeans got control of their religion back, and temporarily at least. So anyways, yeah, so the pagan and the future of these cannibals is the Canaanites, the Amorites, were the red-haired sons of Noah. So Noah's kids all basically were the ancient Europeans. And they were known as the giant pagans who created the golden idols and worshipped with fire. So I didn't even know that. Like when I was a kid, I went to Roman Catholic Church, even worked for the church at one point, luckily before any of the horrid shit was going on. Or at least we didn't hear about it. And then, yeah, when I was asking the priest, I'm like, hey man, it's like we keep talking in the Bible how these new tribes of Israel are wiping out all the original people. I'm like, so who were these original people and what did they look like? And the priest is like, I don't know. Could be anyone, right? It's like, might be that guy, could be this race, who knows? Probably Middle Eastern people, right? Definitely not Europeans, though. I'm pretty sure that's the case. He didn't say it wasn't Europeans, but I kind of think he was hinting at that when he was saying it's probably Middle Eastern people. Yeah, and so it turns out like these ancient red-haired guys were into the fire worshipping, and the reason they were building the golden calves was to do with this whole fucking ritual in the sky that the Magi are doing. So might explain a little bit. Right, so I was thinking too, like outside of the Bible, we got this European stuff, we got the American stuff, but I wanted to show you guys some more information to prove that these red-haired giant cannibals actually existed. They were into super carnivorism, the super carnies. So here we got, what is it, the genealogy of the Akkadian gods. Basically this is, I wanted to show it because the last person that was a giant to survive, other than those ones killed in the cave, was Gilgamesh. And the Mesopotamian tablets explain like how Gilgamesh was a god, and that's why he was half a god, and that's why he was giant. So I was just going to show here. It's like you got the lineage of Gilgamesh, and it shows that his mother was a goddess, but his father was a normal king, and his father was one of the kings of Mesopotamia. And people laughed because they always thought Gilgamesh was fake and he wasn't a real king, because they have the Sumerian kings list and it showed that Gilgamesh lived for thousands of years. So everyone's like, oh, fuck that shit. You can't be real. But then they started digging up other sites of historical records, and everyone kept referring to this king of Ur as being Gilgamesh. So eventually they're like, oh, we can't really keep calling him a myth. It must just be because the dating they were using was way off. Even though the Mesopotamians had more accurate calendars than we do. But anyways, I won't get too much off track. So it just goes to prove that I guess there is more evidence that these giants existed. Oh yeah, and here's some of the treasures from one of the kingdoms of Ur. I don't think it's the same one that Gilgamesh was king of. It's a very similar name, but same region, I guess, Iraq or Iran, Mesopotamia region. And it just goes to show you, like, yeah, here's the golden idols they were building. So you can see the Bible was referring to the evil people as the old Europeans that were doing the pagan religions. Oh, and here's a picture too, just to show you how big Gilgamesh was. Like, they still have his tomb, I believe, in Lebanon somewhere. And it's a fucking massive tomb, and everyone makes fun of it because there's no way someone could actually be that big. But they have records saying that Gilgamesh was so big that he used to like to play with lions as house pets. Like a cat, you would pick up a lion, full-grown lion. So you can imagine just how big he was. Like, fuck. I don't think there's any human alive today that could even pick up a baby lion without getting bit, right? But anyways, too, like, if people are wondering, like, well, what happened to Gilgamesh's genes and stuff, and how all these other giants came to be, well, the Epic of Gilgamesh is kind of fucked up. It tells the story that Gilgamesh not only was the king, but he was like the most jackass king in history. And what he would do is anytime someone in the kingdom was scheduled to be married, he would make sure that he got to the bride first, got her pregnant, and then was like, okay, now you can get married. And then it turned out too that his DNA was so drastically different that every woman who bore a child with him could no longer bear childs with anyone of a different race other than Gilgamesh. So everyone in his kingdom who got married could no longer have kids, and everyone's family who had kids was Gilgamesh's kid. So it's like, man, that was like really cruel to do, but it just goes to show you, like, where did this new race of people all of a sudden appear on the earth from? Well, it goes to show that there's probably at least a few million descendants of Gilgamesh around, if he was alive for thousands of years having kids with every person in a kingdom. And fuck, if this kingdom was massive and like had 1 million people, can you imagine how many kids that would be? Oh, yeah, good old Gilgamesh. So, yeah, Gilgamesh also talked about how meat was superior to plants for when he was doing sacrifices. And it says here he sacrificed a sheep. And I'm pretty sure they were probably meaning the ram, like the male sheep, the one with horns. And they had to place 14 vessels. He poured reeds of cedar, myrtle into the fire. So I guess technically, maybe it's not true to say that meat on its own was enough. There was a balance between meat and plants that Gilgamesh was using for his sacrifices. Maybe that's something that Cain and Abel had already forgotten at that point. Alright, so it says here that the gods smelled the sweet odor of sacrificial animals and gathered like flies over the sacrifice. Then the great goddess arrived. So it's like this sacrifice ritual can summon not only the creator, but goddesses as well. Yeah, and then he talks a little bit about dreams and stuff. I won't read the whole thing because, man, this show is going to go on for fucking hours. I don't have any questions in the chat yet, so I'll just continue. Yeah, so here's some more of the treasures that they pulled out of the kingdom there. And it just goes to show you they're really into the horned beasts, showing it with the sacred tree. It's like, hey, sacred tree, horned beast. It's like, if you weren't knowing to look up in the sky, you could just look at all the artifacts they left. Really should have pointed it out pretty clearly. I think the only reason people today don't know about it is because we don't watch the stars. Like I was saying before, in the city, you don't really see stars very often. So the only clues we could get are hidden. Oh yeah, and here's another one. It shows a human holding the two horned beasts together. I was thinking that almost shows like you have to embrace the animal sacrifice to take over for your sins so that you could do the ritual to become an immortal. Yeah, and I guess people are finding it really fucked up that I've been saying that Mesopotamians and the ancient Europeans are similar or the same people. And it was pretty much like the theory that the Aryans, or not the Aryans, the Hitler and the Nazis had about Aryan history. And a lot of the stuff they discovered about Aryan history all got burned because they didn't want it to be used against them. There was like some massive war crimes court. So any scientists who agreed with the Hitler theology at that point would lose their jobs. So they all started to say, hey, the ancient Mesopotamians are anyone but Aryans, or they would lose their job. So for years and years and years after World War II, we started rewriting all the history books to take Aryans out, or ancient Europeans. I know some people don't like to call Europeans Aryans. I guess technically it's true because Europeans aren't Aryans anymore. We've already had families with regions all over the planet, so none of us are any pure blood anymore. So it is kind of fucked up to use the same terminology, but I guess I do it because the Freemasons, like Albert Pike, refers to Europeans as Aryans all the time. And I think the official translation is also that. So something to do about royalty, but then a lot of the royalty was Europeans at that point, so you could say it's still the same thing. Alright, so yeah, scientists were going for decades saying that Europeans and the ancient Mesopotamians, pagans, had nothing to do with each other. But then we got DNA studies to be done. We started finding the remains, like the Phoenicians were descended all the way down from the same bloodline. And then lo and behold, it shocked the scientists that they were Europeans. And they're like, holy shit, Europeans lived all over the Middle East and Mesopotamia. What a shock! Yeah, and the other thing that was shocking for them too, I guess, is Phoenician culture, I mentioned it before, is nearly identical to Egyptians. They used mummies, caskets, sphinxes. They had the winged disc on their stuff. The only real difference is the Phoenicians were really into ships and trading. So they were like... I don't know if there's an equivalent. Do we have a race today that does a lot of shipping? Maybe the Chinese. So I don't know. Yeah, they were sort of like that of that age. Alright, so I was just going to show you guys like what happened to all this history about the cannibals and shit. Like how come we don't know about it? Well, it turns out like when the Hebrews slaughtered all of the original sons of Noah and took the religion and covered up the history of it, they were doing it almost for good reason because they were trying to get rid of the whole cannibalism thing. So we can look here at the base in North America, the Magog people. So that's basically where I was thinking that that Nod was. And it says too that the Magog people ended up becoming the Gales and the Scythians. So I don't know if you guys have heard, I'm sure you've heard of the Gales before, but the Scythians were like these red-haired and blonde-haired people that lived all over the Middle East before it got taken over by new migrants. And yeah, so the story goes that when Noah did the whole flood situation, that his ancestor, or that bloodline that was in America, like banished from Cain, apparently went down to Tubal Cain. And Tubal Cain managed to make it back to the Middle East. I don't know if he was like doing the gold shipping or what, but he made it back and then he snuck on the ark. So apparently he managed to get into Noah's ark and was part of some of the bloodline. So when we say that Adam and, or what is it, Cain and Abel, I guess, yeah, it's a little bit confusing. But anyway, so yeah, Magog was involved, and then we also had the Tower of Babel story, and some of those people, Nimrod was in there. Yeah, basically these red-haired giants were the ones that had the tower with all the languages in it. And when the Hebrews came and wiped them out and stole all their gold and land and culture, they also got languages. And it's like, here we got the people of Canaan. And at all the ones that were in red, I marked for the ones that got wiped out by like either the Hebrews, the First Nations people, or... Yeah, so the Canaanites, they got wiped out. Some of their ancestors survived and became the Hittites, but then they got wiped out too. A lot of the Hittite ruins are all over Turkey. And Turkey, you can imagine, got all smashed and destroyed by the new migrants that came in and occupied it today. And then... what do we have? Sidon. Sidon is that place that's like in Lebanon, Syria area. And it was the old capital city for the Phoenician shipping empire. And it also happens to be the grandson of Noah's name. So basically all over the world you find ancient ports and all of them are named after Noah's grandsons. And I'm thinking that's because the Phoenicians were trading all along there. And it's neat too, one of the other bloodlines came down to Ashur. And Ashur was also the same name as the god of the creator and that winged disc. So isn't it neat that Noah and his family were still like into the whole pagan, fire worshipping cannibalism at that point? And then even like in Bulgaria and other places around the Middle East, they always like to like discredit the red-haired history. But it turns out like the graves of the Thracian people all over Bulgaria were marked with redhead people on their graves. So I'm pretty sure they weren't like just painting fake hair colors on their graves. And it's like all the text and stuff from the old days refers to it. I'm pretty sure it comes down to is the people that are occupying the land now basically don't want to talk about the people that used to own it. Sort of like in North America, we do the opposite, where we took the land and we talk about it all the time with people. But you can imagine other cultures like, fuck that, we're taking the land and we're never going to talk about it, about the people that used to live here, which is probably a little bit cruel, but it might work a little bit better. And, well, just I guess not work better for everyone, but in the long run, it might cause a little bit more stability. You can imagine in Canada, we're always still fighting with the First Nations people. French and English people are constantly fighting. You probably don't hear about it in the news much, but like even some of our high schools are in like an all-out brawls where the kids separate into the different race groups and beat the shit out of each other, and then they can't go to school anymore because the entire school had a fight. So you can imagine this is a fucking nightmare, and I don't know why the news doesn't cover it much, but you always say too that, what is it, hardship makes you stronger, so I guess technically we're always fighting with each other and it might be making us stronger. Now here it talks about too how the Jews were teaming up with Cyrus, and they were helping Cyrus and Darius, and they were helping wipe out the red-haired people and stealing all their shit. It says that Darius was part of the Zoroastrian faith. And that's pretty wild because the Zoroastrians at one point were considered extinct, or like down to 30,000 members. And that was like back in the early, I guess, 2000s, maybe no, 2012 I was looking them up. And they were saying that there's hardly any left. But that's actually not true, is that a lot of them migrated into, what is it called, Iran. And there's like this huge battle going over for Iran right now, where the Zoroastrians have been constantly fighting with the different occupiers like Islam and what other places they're taking it over. And so the Zoroastrians to this day are still trying to get control of Iran back. And it's like a situation similar to Palestine and Israel, how they're always fighting each other. It's like the Abrahamic religions and the Zoroastrians are fighting still in Iran. And it makes you wonder too, when you get all this crap in the news about Iran, you're like, hey, maybe the Zoroastrians have something to do with this, right? No, and it's weird, like to go into other evidence that some of this shit is true. This story about like Noah being the ancestor of all Europeans was like really popular in Irish history. But Irish and the Romans fought each other about which part of their religion was true, and the Romans won. And then the Irish never really wanted to become Roman Catholics because, like, hey guys, you're telling everyone that you don't know who Noah's ancestors and all this shit is. Meanwhile, it's our history. Why the fuck are you telling people you don't know who it is? So they sort of got into fights over that, but if you look into the ancient Irish text, it has all this shit in there. It's like it says that Noah was the forebearers of all the Europeans. It's got all the Magog stuff in. Yeah, it's even got about how all the red-haired people were in Egypt at that time, and that they ended up getting their asses kicked and had to retreat all the way to Ireland to live. So I guess the Irish people aren't really native to Ireland, that they migrated there after having to retreat. Yeah, I encourage people to check that out too. Like, there's other stories in this LGE history about the Immortals. And there was this one guy that figured out how to get to the Immortal home. But when he got there, they were like at the gate and they wouldn't let him in. They're like, hey, we don't want any more mortals coming into the seventh heaven. There's no way you're allowed in. So then he started telling them that they should let him in because he's really gifted at stuff. And they're like, oh, if you're a really good singer, it doesn't matter because we already have the best singer. And they're like, oh, it doesn't matter if you're a good artist, we already have the best artist. And then it turned out that not only was he good at stuff, but he was the best at every art, or like everything. Sort of like a polymath. Someone who could do everything. Like he was a musician, he could sing, he could fight, and he could do all of it to like the extremely good. So eventually the Immortals caved and let him in. They're like, okay, if you can do the best of everything, we'll let you in. But it just goes to show you, it's like, I think this is why like the planet is like fucked up right now with the whole migration issues around the planet. Everyone's like, oh, why are we fighting, like trying to control our borders and not letting people in? And it's like we're starting to realize as a humanity that everything on the earth is limited. We have a limited space, we have a limited amount of resources, and the more and more people that are growing, everything's becoming more and more expensive because we're running out of land, we're running out of resources. So I think that's sort of like a metaphor of like the immortals trying to teach us, so like, hey, this problem that you're facing on the earth with not having enough space and stuff is the same reason we're not letting all of you guys into the seventh heaven. It's like there's not enough room. And I can imagine the seventh heaven, if everyone just stays there forever and never moves to another plane of existence, it would just start getting pretty full, right? Especially like everything in the universe is limited. Nothing goes on forever. Right, and just to clarify too, like the exact verses, it even tells us in the Bible that they wiped out all these red-haired giants. It goes on to say, when you migrate, it's like, you shall not leave alive anything that breathes. Utterly destroy the people that welcome you into their homes. And then the Hittites, the Canaanites, the Amorites, and all of them, God has commanded you to wipe them out so that they can't teach you. It's like, that's kind of fucked up right there, right? It's like, here we have this God who's apparently all nice, doesn't want people killing people, but then when he tells his people to migrate into someone else's land, he tells them to wipe everyone out and steal everything, and then don't allow them to teach you. It's like, what the hell was God or the Creator so afraid of people learning? So then I found out it's like these Hittite people were some of the early Europeans that could translate the old text cuneiform. So I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons why they were being wiped out, so they couldn't teach. Because if they were able to teach cuneiform, they could read the stories about how the Hebrews came and destroyed everyone and took everything. And it's probably too because of the whole cannibalism thing. You gotta really blame the Hebrews for doing that, because like, same with the First Nations thing. The people are stealing your babies and eating their brains. Like, fuck that shit, wipe them out, right? Wipe out my ancestors. Alright. So there's a couple of First Nations prophets in history that are really wild when it comes to this pagan knowledge. Like this guy Crazy Horse, he was talking about how he sees a time of 7 generations when all the colors of humanity will gather under the sacred tree and begin, a whole world will be one again. So I was thinking it's almost like a prophecy that everyone's going to remember this immortality ritual, and that we're all going to get into the 7th heaven. I don't know if that's the case, but, well, who knows? Let's hope, right? And then there's another legend too, one of my favorite prophets, Shawanasawi. I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. It's like I've looked him up like a million different places and I can read it, but I've never heard his name pronounced in person, so I don't know what it sounds like. And anyways, Shawanasawi was visited by this winged disc or thunderbird, and the creator appeared to him where he was sitting on a huge chair floating on a cloud. I think he was like a white guy with a beard too. So isn't it funny how like every culture has the same creator story where they meet this guy sitting on a cloud? So I don't know if that's a coincidence, but anyway, so the creator held a dish of water in his lap, excuse me, and asked him to look into it. And in the reflection, he saw the future. And the future reflection he saw was horrible. He saw the Europeans coming and wiping out all of his people, and then taking all the land, and then destroying the land probably too. So it was fucked. Like I think he asked the creator, like, what the hell? Like, why are you showing me this? This is horrible, right? And then he told him that to only concern himself with what's going on with his tribe, and to obey the laws that the creator gave, and to make sure that you just focus on yourself, because all these other shit happening on the world is like some gigantic plan. Everything has to go according to this plan, and you might as well just sit back and try to focus on yourself, because you're not really going to be able to stop the entire creator's plan, right? And hopefully it's not a super bad plan. Alright, so I guess in this slide I was showing too that Ezekiel's wheel and stuff was the same winged disc creator god thing. Yeah, and then the Assyrians, they showed him standing on the horned beast and that ring around him. I thought it was a mirror because of the Egyptian version. They showed like a mirror with Thoth standing next to it, and it was very similar. So I'm thinking maybe the Egyptians developed this offering pool technology to the point where instead of using a pool of liquid to see the reflection, they were able to use mirrors instead. It's sort of like the whole magic mirror on the wall thing. Alright, so yeah, let's see. Yeah, this wing disc version that I have here is one of the first major discoveries I made when I was getting into this occult research. Is I found out that the wing disc god from those Mesopotamian tablets just so happens to be the same one that the Zoroastrians are still worshipping today, Ahura Mazda. And that Albert Pike, he was like the master, the highest on the chain of Freemasonry. He wrote all of the old books that the Freemasons used to use, or the old school lodges still use. So when he ended up writing that Ahura Mazda is the secret meeting to Freemasonry. And I think he has another book that's saying that the Vedic stuff is the secret meeting. But where that comes in is Zoroastrians and the Vedics were the opposites of each other, where the one's gods were the other's demons and vice versa. So technically they were the same religion, just opposite ends. And I think this is what Crazy Horse was talking about too, like that Mexico coat of arms that I got on the coin. It just so happens to be the same occult stuff that you find in Africa, Europe, Asia, India. So that's like where Crazy Horse was talking about all the different colors around the world of people coming back together. And I was just going to show you too, like Zoroastrians are still kicking today. And they basically have temples all over the world now. There's some in Toronto, some in the States. They keep it pretty low key. Like when I tried getting into the Zoroastrian temple near me in Toronto, they say that you have to pay, what is it, 50 or 100 bucks to join up to be a member. But I don't know if they accept membership applications from anyone. Like I tried looking at their fire temple like on Street View on Google, and they built it all securely. Like they put up giant fences and giant bushes so you can't even see what's there unless you're like already know what's there and looking it up on Google. Yeah, it's just in this slide here I was showing that the Zoroastrian temples have this like old pagan stuff still going, like the winged disc and the fire worshipping, but I don't know if they're into the cannibalism. I would assume not because it's so illegal, but just because their whole religion is based on it and they're being very secretive, it makes me wonder. Like even The Simpsons, maybe if someone wants to remind me, post it in the chat and I'll try to post what episode it is. But on The Simpsons, there was one that, it was funny, me and a friend of mine were talking about the Zoroastrians while watching The Simpsons, and all of a sudden the Simpsons started talking about the Zoroastrians. I didn't even know that there was an episode about them. And the episode is when Mr. Burns is looking up evil connections on who to contact, and he's got this Rolodex on his desk, and he's flipping through the pages of like the most evil connections he has, and the Zoroastrians were in it. And I was like, ooh, the Simpsons are like calling out the Zoroastrians. I'm pretty sure like most people watch that episode like, what the fuck? Evil Zoroastrians? What the hell is he talking about? It's like the Simpsons are really far ahead. On this one fountain here on the right, Kirill was showing it to me. He was one of the researchers in Bulgaria. It's got the same symbology on it, the winged disc and stuff, and the different, what is it, solar alignment shit. But anyways, this fountain was apparently almost destroyed by the Turkish people, like the Ottoman Empire, when they're going through Europe, slaughtering everyone and taking all their land, like Turkey and stuff. It's like they ordered this statue destroyed. They're like, hey, get rid of this fountain. People are going to find out what it means. And I guess somehow the fountain was saved. So you can still see it in Bulgaria today. Alright, let's see. Alright, so that was the last slide, huh? Alright, so I guess, yeah, thanks everyone for watching this debate about veganism and carnivorism. I guess I kind of focused a lot on the carnivore aspect about it and how it's so evil. I guess, I don't know, Sverge is, if he ever watches this, like, I'd be really careful about, like, where this future of carnivorism is going. I'm pretty sure if you guys start eating baby brains from people, there's going to be hell to pay, just like there was in the old days. But, oh yeah, the future of carnivorism too, it's like, I'm pretty sure you guys have heard, I can't mention who, but or I'll get my channel taken down. He used to talk about some of how the future of carnivorism has progressed to the point where hospitals in Brazil have started taking babies and harvesting stem cells from them. I'm sure like places do this all over, but the big controversy that this guy got his channel taken down for was a lot of the hospitals in Brazil aren't really aborting babies and then taking the stem cells, but aborting babies, keeping them alive for as long as they can after the abortion so that they can keep harvesting more and more stem cells. So that's some pretty fucking like borderline like starting to eat baby brains type shit, right? So I guess that's where like the elites, like the Sphere just talked about it a bit, I think, how he talks about how the occult are like into drinking blood and stuff. I'm pretty sure they've realized they don't actually have to eat the blood and drink it. Like there's other ways to get the stem cells now with injections and stuff. So maybe the future of carnivorism isn't horrible, that we'll be able to find ways of regenerating babies' brain stem cells without having to kill babies over and over again. Similar to how the vegan philosophy is very good in that they want to try to find a way to survive without causing harm as well. And I thought it was neat too that First Nations people here also kind of had that belief going for a while, where they could just eat animals that had fallen over Niagara Falls. Like there was a whole tribe that ate meat all the time, but they didn't actually have to kill animals because the animals were dying naturally, and they would just take the carcasses from the bottom of the falls, eat that. So I was like, there's probably ways that veganism is right, that we can accomplish something where we can still survive by eating animals and not need to kill them. Maybe like in the future we'll be able to use replicators and just replicate meat. But I'm like really skeptical of veganism right now because the whole idea that we don't need to eat meat doesn't really add up. Like I know lots of people that have gotten really sick and almost ruined their lives from veganism, and it has like a cult type atmosphere to it, almost the same way the meat eaters are. Like I guess I should clarify too how I started this whole thing. Yeah, it's like what was it? I think about a year and a half or 2 years ago, I had like a major concussion, and I was off work for a long time, and it was like 3 months that I was like doing basically solitary confinement. My concussion symptoms got so bad that I couldn't like look at stuff, and I couldn't like hear people talk. Bright noises or bright lights and noise of loud would really mess with me. So for a while, what I started doing was just listening to podcasts. And then when I heard Sverge's first podcast, it was like a lifesaver in a way, because I was going through so much hell, like physically and mentally, that hearing everyone's stories about how they went through veganism and went through horrible health problems was almost like something I could relate to. So I guess in a way I was laughing in a lot of it, sorry, but it kind of helped cheer me up to hear that people were like going through awful stuff too, and it wasn't just me. But yeah, then that whole thing where they were talking about how being like a carnivore could help you recover, and I had a horrible experience with the carnivore diet as well. Like my family was never into eating fish, so I've pretty much gone my entire life without eating fish before. The occasional like fish and chips like type fish, but nothing like salmon or cod or any like amazing, like really super nutrient dense fish. So I was watching Sverge's videos, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna try curing my concussion by going out and eating a whole ton of salmon. Like I've never eaten salmon before, and it's supposed to be a brain food, and having all these issues with memory from my concussion. So I'm like, hey, I'll try salmon. So I went to a sushi place and tried raw salmon. And God, did I ever feel great for like the first half hour. I was like, oh, I'm getting this mental clarity boost. This is amazing. Serge was right the whole time. But then when I got home, I had an allergic reaction to meat or fish. And I'm like, what the fuck? I didn't even know fish allergies existed. So I looked it up, and it turns out it's true that if you haven't eaten fish like salmon before, like your whole life, and you're close to your 40s, it's very risky to eat lots of it right away. You're supposed to only eat small amounts and work your way up so that your body can tolerate eating it. So when I ate a whole shitload of it and got home, my whole body started to ache. Like first, like my leg, it was like getting this weird cramp in my knee. I'm like, what the fuck? I didn't like do any exercises or anything. Why the hell is my knee so sore? And then all my joints started just aching. And I'm like, holy fuck, did I have some bad reaction? And then I looked up sushi side effects. And then I found out that whole thing, if you haven't eaten salmon before, you're supposed to eat small amounts. I was like, holy fuck, I wish Serge would have told me about that. But I'm sure maybe he didn't know that fish allergies actually do exist and that meat isn't like this superfood that's immune from side effects. I find it's weird, like vegans and carnivores almost say the exact same thing, but the opposite ends of a coin. Like one is saying that plants is amazing and has no side effects, and the other is like, oh, meat is amazing and has no side effects. So like over the course of my life, I always wanted to become vegan because I heard it was amazing. But I didn't really know anyone who was vegan to actually ask them how it was affecting them. And I was always eating like really cheap, like processed food, and I could never afford like expensive vegetables. So I was like, holy, maybe one day I can afford to be a vegan. But then I knew, started like when veganism started getting popular, I started like people in my family would become vegan and like end up in the hospital. And I was like, holy fuck, man, this vegan diet is like really dangerous. I never realized it had a whole cult aspect to it. So I don't know if anyone's caught up in the carnivore cult or the vegan cult. It's like both are really dangerous, but at the same time, like I like water fasting still. And part of my religion, like the Bible, talks about the perfect diet. And they say that you're supposed to eat meat sometimes, but go vegetarian at other times. So I still believe that, like, as much as I bash the carnivores and the vegans, they both do offer some like benefits. That's why I watch their videos. So yeah, I'm not trying to bash either one completely. It's like I guess what I bash is doing it too long. Like I think you can do it for short periods of time and it is good for you, or to some degree, or for some people. Another thing I noticed too is women that go vegan have a really rough time if they're like menstruating a lot, because you lose a lot of blood and then you need more iron. So you end up getting anemia if you're not eating red meat, and you start feeling cold all the time, and that's fucking not good either, right? So, and then the whole vegan thing too, where they're talking about vegans are great because you don't die of heart attacks. So then I checked, okay, let's see how many vegans have lived a really long time without having a heart attack. And fuck, the founder of the Vegan Society, or the American one, he died of a heart attack at age 66. So I'm like, oh, so much for that whole fucking living forever with no heart attacks theory, right? Shouldn't laugh. Sorry for the family. Fuck, man. Heart attacks are horrible, but... Yeah, so I was just going to say, like, one other part of the Bible, too. They have a whole page or chapter dedicated to just what animals to eat and why. And it's so advanced. Like, today you're trying to figure out what animals you can eat. Like, you basically go on guidelines that you read somewhere. But the Bible gave you guidelines on how to just look at an animal and, like, count how many toes it has. And that will reveal its biology and tell you if it's safe to eat or not. I was like, holy shit, it's like in modern times, they don't really tell you that, right? Like, just look at this feature on like a hoof and see if it's edible or not. And how did the people in the Bible figure that out like thousands of years ago? Makes me wonder if like the Anunnaki gods or something were passing information on so that they could teach people what was the best diet. And then even other people in the Bible started to argue with it as well. Like, even though they had that whole page to tell them the ideal diet, there was this guy that, John the Baptist? And he apparently found the perfect diet. And what he was eating was locusts with honey. And apparently he was like super strong, super healthy. And that was like the perfect diet that worked for him. So I don't know if Sverge or any vegans want to try that. Well, I guess you couldn't eat locusts or honey and be considered vegan still. Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this episode. Yeah, sorry for doing this show on like a live broadcast format. I just fucking hate editing. And ever since my concussion, I have really bad concentration problems for like complex tasks. So editing is definitely not the greatest. But if anyone wants to do a future show on veganism or carnivorism and share what their experiences are, pros or cons of it, I'm always up for it. I know I talked actually to Sverge and was asking him if I could be a guest on his show, and he's all game for it, but he wants to do a pre-interview, and I kind of wanted to do my interview here first just so that I could recommend people to watch my video after I talk to him, because I'm pretty sure Sverge isn't going to want to go through 2 hours of slides with me, and I know he is really against the Bible, so it's like I totally agree with him at one point. Like, I'm not a big fan of what the Hebrews did to my ancestors, but really the Bible has so much information and it's so accurate. I have to look at it at some point. Alright, so, oh yeah, I guess I should mention too, Da Vinci is one of the people, like in modern times, or I guess not that modern, who had interactions with the Zoroastrians. And apparently the Zoroastrians taught him everything he knew. So these ancient pagan, like magi guys getting information from this ritual, they had so much information that they were teaching Da Vinci. I was like, Da Vinci's pretty fucking amazing, the stuff that his inventions and stuff. So really, if that stargazing ritual stuff does give you information, Da Vinci's probably one of the biggest evidences that it's true. And it turned out that he had some bad interactions with him in the end as well. Like, you probably recall that I was saying the Zoroastrians aren't the greatest guys. Well, Da Vinci and the Zoroastrians got into such a fight that I think his quote was that they made him and they destroyed him. So I was like, yeah, it didn't end well. Alright, so yeah, I guess the shirt I was wearing, I was going to mention it too. The guide stones that this shirt is sort of talks about what the immortals were talking about how there's not enough room to go into heaven. They were posting on the guide stones that we can have a max of 500 million people on the planet before we kill too many animals and damage the environment and we start going on a downhill path to destruction. So they were trying to warn everyone to stay around 500 million. And we're at like, what is it, 8 billion or something right now, so we're substantially over that number. And a lot of people are thinking that the Illuminati or the Zoroastrians or the Freemasons are planning to wipe people out and cull the numbers down to about 500 million so that we can balance how many animals we need to eat to survive with how many people there is. But I don't really think that's true, just because the Creator told everyone that he wasn't going to wipe us out with a flood again. So I'm assuming that maybe some fire is coming, or lightning, earthquakes, who knows. But if I had to guess, human population is going to take a drastic decline. And it's not like all doom and gloom, like the way China is set up, where they have the one-child policy. I'm pretty sure there's an alternative plan that all this bad shit doesn't have to happen. Basically, I was thinking, like, you know how Elon Musk has his plan. You know, he's not really talking about it openly, but he's like saying that he's going to build habitats for people to live on Mars. And I think that's a great solution, because what happens if all of a sudden the Earth can't sustain so many people and we got to get down to 500 million? Well, fuck, if billions of people start moving to other planets and living there, we can just make a tax to come to the Earth. And then so all the poor people live on different planets and only the rich people live on the Earth, and they'll have tons of animals and everything will be fine. I'm pretty sure the science fiction has kind of wrote some movies on how that turns out, where the people that live on Mars and the other planets aren't happy about not being able to come back to Earth, so they end up having giant civil wars. But hey, at least that's better than having to cull the people down to 500 million on the Earth. Alright, so thanks everyone for watching, and I guess maybe you better not subscribe to my channel, because if I get 1,000 subscribers and monetize and get the motivation to start doing more and more episodes, I'm probably going to get my channel taken down, because YouTube recently came out with that announcement that shows that are not commercially viable are going to be removed. I'm pretty sure there wasn't anything I just said in this that would be commercially viable. Yeah, so I guess I kind of want to get to 1,000 subscribers, but it's probably not a better idea. Yeah, make sure to like or dislike the video. If you dislike the video, it's like, I don't blame you. It's fucking horrid, some of the stuff I talked about. And then, oh yeah, and then don't share it. I'm pretty sure if you share this video, whoever you share it with is going to think you're crazy and that you might be into human sacrifices and eating baby brains. So probably shouldn't share this video if you still like having friends. Right, but I really appreciate everyone for watching it if you watched it this far. And yeah, if Kasumi Chris watched it, I really appreciate your videos. She does some really awesome ones about how, like, far out topics, even like how celibacy can improve stuff. And I was like, I've done some of that in the past too, so it was really cool that I've found another YouTuber who is into that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's usually the opposite today. Anyone who's like not a fucking horn dog is considered a weirdo. But hey, whatever, right? Everyone can't be the same. So yeah, thanks for watching everyone, and I guess I take these endings on forever, so I better just cut it quick. And yeah, take care, and I'll try to do some more videos soon. We'll see how it goes. Later.